Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Business Innovators Radio. Again, this is your host, Matthew Loughran, and today we have a very special guest, Mr. Jim Merryman. Jim is the CEO and president of OFD Foods, formerly known as Oregon Freeze Dry. Jim has been with the organization since 1974 and has a whole bunch of knowledge to share with us about going global in international markets and exporting. So, Jim, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Glad to be here.
Great to have you on the show here today. I'm very excited to hear a little bit more about yourself and your organization. So first off, Jim, can you tell us a little bit about maybe your background as well as the OFD Foods business?
Sure. My background, mechanical engineering from Oregon State. Needed a job, got a job here at this small company that was started in 1963, and I joined in 1974, and so it was pretty much still in the startup phase. And we joined just to get a job, like I said. Ended up doing cleaning of the gutters and garbage pickup, things like that. Liked the company, made some suggestions, and long story short, ended up in the engineering department, the maintenance department, the production department, procurement, sales and marketing, then continued moving around and ended up as vice president of sales, and then senior vice president of sales, marketing, and research and development, and then moved into the role of president and now in the role of CEO and president. So that was 44 years of what happened with me here at Oregon Freeze Dry.
Wow, that is quite the ladder story, right? So starting out from cleaning gutters, all the way to the top of the C-suite. So very, very interesting, that path for yourself. I'm sure you've had many different experiences, throughout those 44 years that you've been there with the organization. That was quite the journey, I would say, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. In 1986, we were. In 1978, we were purchased by 7-Up, and then 7-Up was purchased by Philip Morris, and they invested a lot in the company, and it was a good time. I was able to work for a large company and get a lot of training and educational opportunities because of being associated with a large company. And then in 1986, we purchased the company in an LBO from Philip Morris. There was 22 of us, and I was lucky enough to be one of those 22, and so became an owner, if you will. And then in 2016, just recently, a year ago, we just had our 1-year anniversary, we actually sold the company, and I reinvested back in. So we now have an investment partner, Endeavor Capital, out of the Pacific Northwest here, and myself and 4 other executives own the company. And so for me, it's been a good run, going from cleaning gutters to president, CEO, but also majority single shareholder of the company.
Wow, yes, that's quite the background, and I appreciate the candor from the answer as well, and kind of letting the listeners know about your experience with that. Now, obviously, in regards for this specific show, we're really focusing in on educating folks about international markets and going global with their business. So I do understand you have been instrumental in the growth of exporting at OFD. Can you tell us a little bit about that process for you guys internally?
Sure. And we were looking at, right now we have, at that time, 70% of the market share in the sporting goods industry for food. That continues today. And we were looking at expanding that. And Canada was the obvious first export for us, which we were successful in doing. relatively simple there. You need to change the label to meet the labeling codes, but it's the same product and so forth. As we went to look at overseas, since we're out here on the Pacific Coast, we started with Japan. We sell a product that is used in food storage emergency situations, and Japan has a lot of earthquakes. So back in 1978, we did our first export to Japan of our products for specifically emergency situations, and that has continued to today. In 1995, I was in the sales role and looking at doing more than just that. Could we do other things there? And so we looked at ingredient businesses and other things. And so I led the charge to expand our export business, which then led us into multitude of countries, heading into Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, China, and other smaller countries that come off of that. So, if we have a distributor in Hong Kong, then they distribute to Malaysia and Thailand and so forth.
Okay, so you mentioned a couple of key things in there. And obviously, you started at Canada, right? Because it was the easiest and first thing to do, right? You said it was just really a change in the labeling and so forth. And then you said next you kind of jumped overseas, headed into Asia and through the route. And then you mentioned a very specific word there, distributor. Can you really maybe talk a little bit about maybe relationships that you've developed, or because a biggest question that we hear from people is, well, do I get a distributor? Do I don't get a distributor? Can you maybe talk a little bit about your experience with distributors as well?
Yes, in Canada we use both distributors and we sell direct. So it all depends on the size of the company, and we're selling our retail products, our Mountain House backpacking food into Canada. So if the chain or individual store is large enough, then they can deal with importing goods into Canada. We deal direct with them. We also deal with distributors that then resell our product to a multitude of smaller individual stores or chain operations. To get the distributors, there's listings that you can get from the Canadian government or other governments too, of food distributors, and then we're looking for ones that deal specifically, in our case, in the sporting goods industry. So that narrows it down to a very short list. And then we talk to those large chain stores that we're dealing with, and did they have any suggestions of distributors that they knew about, and that they could make some suggestions for us, which they did, which narrowed the list down even further. And then we did interviews of those distributors to find out which ones understood at least the sporting goods market as it related to backpacking and hunting and fishing and camping, very specific to our needs. And that then led us down to two distributors, one for Eastern and one for Western Canada. That same concept applied in Japan. Since we wanted to sell the items for food storage and emergency situations in Japan, we contacted the government agencies over there that deal in helping companies on importing of food into their country, which then led us to a list of potential importers. And we started talking to ones that were specific in looking at our segment of the market, which is the emergency preparedness. That led us then down to a shorter and shorter list until we did interviews with several and found one that we felt we could work with. The biggest issue with a distributor is they really don't understand your business. They really don't understand the product because they're handling hundreds of them. And so you need to be the one to do the educating. of both of that distributor as well as who they are selling to. They're the conduit for you to get really down to the store level and then all the way to the consumer level. So it's your job to provide the information and the education necessary. It's their job to get the doors open for you and then supply the actual product, because you'll use them to ship to and import, and then they'll do the distributing out to those stores, and they'll do the daily calls or weekly calls or whatever is necessary. But education has to come from you. I
think that was just a complete, key advice there. You've went through so much solid material in that answer, but I think ending it off with education, right? Because ultimately it's your business, right? It's not that distributor's business. It's your product on the front line that you're providing the actual customer experience that they're having with your products as the end user. So it's very important to make sure that the distributor is educated on how you conduct your own business, et cetera. That was excellent information about kind of how to find or narrow down distributors. I'm really kind of curious though about, once you have a distributor and you're looking at different foreign countries, how do you either maybe create some demand in that country, or how do you even pick a country to go into?
Yeah, good question. So how do you do that? I'm just teasing you. That's not easy, and so you have to understand
it's definitely not.
So you have to understand your product and how it's being sold here in the United States. And like I said, going into Canada first, you get exposure to how am I going to deal in another country, one that's not very far away and actually not that different from yourself here. But so we understand our product, so we're looking to get into the sporting goods stores for us. It could be grocery for somebody else, it could be catalog business for somebody else, or whatever, but it's based off of what you already know. We knew sporting goods stores. We wanted people that were in that outdoor adventure market. And the second area was the emergency preparation. And government agencies here in the United States, government agencies in Canada, government agencies in Japan are all looking to how can we protect our people and provide them with food. So that becomes the common denominator, if you will, on how we look for who's going to buy it from us. And in Japan, for example, majority of sales are done to government agencies. And we have learned since 1978 a lot about that, and it's very different than here in the United States. And so in the beginning, we made a few mistakes. You do have to remember that it is a different country, it is a different way of doing business, and you cannot force what you know here as the right answer is going to be the right answer in whatever country you go into. It's a starting point. It is a conversation starting. But then you have to adapt to the differences that are in those countries with their demand and how their consumers look at your product and the marketplace that they have.
I think you bring up some great points there as well, right? So it's all about kind of working with individuals in those countries as well to make sure you're adopting to the local customs and their buying process. And when I talk about buying process, if I think about a very simplistic way for people to kind of start selling abroad, e-commerce typically comes to mind, right? So whether that's in the U.S. or internationally, I would love to maybe get your take on using e-commerce as well, maybe pros or cons, and if you guys have done that, if you can share some experiences.
Yes, we have done it. We're doing it into China right now. Alibaba is, their version of Amazon, if you will. And there's pros and cons to it. You do have to be careful on the volume that you are selling, because if it's going to individual people, then generally speaking, this isn't true in every country, but generally speaking, you can go ahead and ship to those individual people. If you're selling of any kind of volume and you need to look up the rules and regulations by country, I don't want to give a number and then have somebody go, but I did that and it didn't work. You have to look up how many you're allowed to sell to any one individual, and then it becomes more than just that country's definition of individual usage. And if you exceed that, now you're in violation and you're not allowed to be selling there. For example, in Canada, you have to have a bilingual label. That's required by law. If you're selling to individual people, you can sell them some U.S. product that does not have a bilingual label on it. If you're selling above a limit, now that is considered not selling to an individual, and it has to have a bilingual label, just like any other commerce would in a brick-and-mortar store in Canada. So those are our experiences with, selling on online situations. And so really the big volume is in not selling online from here, but actually getting into distribution in those countries, and then in those countries selling online inside of the country versus selling online from here to the country, if that's making sense, if you're following what I'm saying.
Yeah, so it sounds like a key way to use e-commerce efficiently if selling internationally is almost have that distribution set up where the product is already in country for that target country, and then using a platform, for example, as you mentioned, Alibaba in China, to then basically be the transaction and distribution platform that those individuals or organizations are interacting with. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. That's what we have found to be most effective.
I know you mentioned China as well. I mean, is there any specific plans for OFD and expansion into China? Or obviously it's a massive market, and I'm just kind of tossing that out there for you. If you feel free to share if you can.
Yes. We have a strategic plan, and yes, it does involve that. I don't want to necessarily be giving out everything, but the concept of getting into China is they're developing a larger and larger middle class, and so spendable income is going up. And in that spendable income, they would like to buy products that are coming from outside of China, made in the United States or Europe or other countries. There's been issues with food supply in China. So if they have a choice, they're going to buy their daily needs inside the country, but they're going to take that spendable income and buy some things that are coming from outside of China and are willing to spend that money on those products. So yes, it's definitely a growth area into the future for, I think, the world market. They historically have looked at exporting as their generation of dollars going into their country, and now they are switching to more internal growth versus everything being external growth.
Great. Again, thanks for sharing that. Absolutely. And then obviously, I mean, there's a lot of steps that are involved when looking to, do the exporting route. I would love to know kind of your perspective. So whenever a business takes on a new initiative, right, typically there's an executive sponsor to help push that and drive that. So again, you being in the C-suite, would love to kind of hear from you about, from a CEO role or leadership role, what do companies really need from that executive sponsorship to help kind of drive the exporting, piece of their business?
Well, I'm going to give you a very specific answer on it that may sit well with people and may not, but you have to have a multi-year, and I would think the longer the better, 5-year and beyond strategy. And in that strategy, you need to determine how you want your company to grow? Where do I see my growth opportunities at? What am I going to innovate in? Maybe doing different than I am today. It could be a total different marketplace, could be a total different product, or whatever. But it's all part of a bigger picture that I think the CEO is charged with making that happen. What is that vision for this company? And then, and only then, you then back that up and say, 5 years from now, I want to be X. So, you start with a paragraph that says, when I grow up 5 years from now, this is what I want the company to look like. Back that up and say, okay, in year 4, what do I need to be doing? In year 3, 2, 1, this year, what do I need to be doing to make sure that I can stay on the path that I need for that strategy vision? If in that it says we want to export, to me that meant we had great distribution of everything here in the United States, and it was getting tougher to grow only in the United States. So that part of the strategy becomes we want to continue to grow that area. Where else is there opportunities for us? Okay, that's in export. So now it becomes part of the strategy. So when it becomes part of the strategy, then it makes sense, and you have that C-suite sign-off that then you put out to your sales group. Okay, now who's going to handle this export opportunity? And as they move forward, it's going to require changes in the organization. But since it's part of the strategy, everyone in the organization should fully understand and support that because it makes sense. If you don't have the strategy already laid out, then you're fighting an uphill battle. Why do you want to go into here? Why do you want to go over to that? I don't think that makes sense. Or R&D is saying, yeah, but I'm supposed to be doing these things over here for these other markets. Why would I spend time doing that for export? Becomes an uphill battle. And so the strategy becomes the C-suite backing of it, if you will, that I have found is absolutely a requirement for the growth of the company.
And I think you bring up a great point there in regards for that executive strategy, right? That roadmap, something to look back on, where the rest of the organization can then refer back to, right? And you can track your KPIs along that strategy. You can track your KPIs along your specific roadmap. Now, if I'm in a position right now where I'm a new person or I'm in my organization, I'm looking to start that strategy, right? And say I've hit capacity in my market for my specific product, and I want to get exporting. What are some early stage milestones for that strategy? Because to me, I would think of maybe like trade shows, for example, might be a good early stepping stone to get a taste for an international buyer. Because when I look at C-suites that they do strategy well, but they don't execute, right? Execution of the strategy is the real key to getting things done. So maybe can you share maybe some of those early adoption milestones, like a trade show, for example, or how would someone go about finding a good trade show, or tips for those? I feel like those might be a good instant segue to kind of get the people that are interested in exporting some exposure as well.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. So now you have a C-suite that has said that's part of our strategy. So now somebody is going to be assigned that market segment and to make it happen. I would agree, looking at what trade shows are available. And again, you want to get as refined as you can on the trade show to specifically what you're looking to do. If you're in the food business, you want to look for those food shows, and some of them are fresh market only. Some of them are frozen market only, and so for me, I'm not interested in those shows. Are there ones specific for the dried industry? Not really, but are they in the sporting goods section? So now that trade show starts to make more sense for me, and you can make use of the state of Oregon agencies that can help you on the export side and give you this information about what trade shows are available in what country. And then, but it's up to you then to narrow that down onto what ones that I'm going to go to. I would recommend that you just attend first and don't have a booth first, even if it has a U.S. pavilion in that trade show. That's great, but you should attend, walk the show, see what's going on, what's working for booths and what's not. What should I bring? Should I bring samples? Should I bring literature? Should I bring videos? Which ones seem to attract the most attention? Okay, then what is in that booth? Is it samples are on display, finished goods on display? What is making it work? Is it people speaking the language? Do you have to have translators there? All of those things. What is the literature written in? A lot of countries, English is okay. A lot of countries that's not okay. You need to have it in both English and whatever the native language is written there. So you need to observe all of that. That then sets you up for attending the next trade show so that you can now start to make your contacts. But you can make contacts with distributors prior to attending a trade show. And because you can get those lists, the state of Oregon does a great job in Portland of providing information on different countries and what trade shows are available, what distributors are available, and that are willing to work with on importing of products. So make use of all of those things.
You just gave so many just best practices right there, for people that are looking to export, right? If I kind of condense down what you just said about the trade show, is really go there, experience it first, right? Be a sponge, see what's working, see what's not working. It sounds like you have the ability to then even get lists before shows, through that resource that you just mentioned with the state of Oregon. Then maybe do some connections and reach out beforehand and so forth. So, very, very solid information. With those best practices, I would like to kind of flip that into say, obviously being in this industry now for 40 plus years, what kind of pitfalls have you seen as well that others might want to avoid?
If we the biggest pitfalls is delivery of your product to the consumer, and how do I make sure that my product is actually getting to that consumer that I need it to, or that store that I need to if I go through a distributor or whatever. And so you need to make sure that you're working one that's trustworthy. Well, how do you work with one that's trustworthy? How do you know that they're trustworthy? That's going to come from you interviewing them. That's going to come from dealing with the state of Oregon, and which will then put you in touch with that country's different agencies that exist there. Lack of a better term, their Better Business Bureau, and so that you can then make sure that you're dealing with someone that is reputable and doesn't have a bunch of issues. Next thing is you should set up an irrevocable letter of credit. It's very common, not common here for us to use inside of our walls, but it's very common outside of our walls, and you should use it. You set up the irrevocable letter of credit, you use that multiple times, and before you would ever move to offering credit to someone. And then when you do offer credit, well, then what's going to trigger payment? Is it that at the time you ship, they need to be paying you? Is it the time that it arrives in the country? Is it the time after it releases from customs inside of their country? Is it when it arrives at their location, if it's going to a warehouse or whatever? What triggers you actually getting paid? So you have to remember the cash flow and how long all of this will take from the time that you're spending the money on converting your product and making your product to when you will actually get paid for it is much different than here in the United States, where you can make it and ship it very quickly and easily to someone outside.
I think that's some great information right there. I think especially on the cash flow management piece at the end. so people can really understand, if they have to float, what that float looks like, based on your contracts and so forth. So excellent information, Jim. I really appreciate that. Now, kind of transition a little bit is I'd kind of maybe just want to go into maybe some personal passions for you as well. I mean, obviously, this is a program here for Oregon Business Innovators, and we've mentioned the state of Oregon a couple times. You mentioned the city of Portland. But I'd love to maybe hear a little bit more from you about maybe a personal passion or community activity that you'd like to maybe share with our listeners.
Yeah, we're in Albany, Oregon, so we're in the middle of the Willamette Valley in a small blue collar town, and we have a lot of different industries here. Metals industry, wood industry, and as well as us in the food industry. And just like all across the United States, there's an issue with workforce. And where does this workforce come from? And we're all in demand for it. Unemployment's very low. So we put together a program, what we call the Pipeline, and it's Pipeline to Jobs. So we're working with breaking down barriers and silos between K through 12 businesses and the community college, so that we can make sure that kids are aware of what's happening in the manufacturing industry right here locally. And it isn't required to have a 4-year education. You do need to have some more skill sets than you get in high school. And so we started working towards this. It's business driven, and we are marketing it. We have a website. We have staff that all the local businesses are funding to get middle school kids exposure to what jobs are available out here in the local businesses. The passion I have for this is in kids, as well, of course, is to make our community stronger by having strong businesses in our community that are very successful, and what's going to make them successful is having a good team of employees, and so we're trying to help develop all of that. These silos that can happen between K through 12 in their world of academia, businesses off in our world, and community college off in their world, and we're not taking care of each other's needs to stop. And so we've been working very hard on this Pipeline program, and I encourage other communities in the United States to work together and break down silos and come up with common goals that work for you and your community. This Pipeline program to Jobs is what has been working for us. And I encourage everyone to start working with their local school systems to help educate kids on what's available for them in the job market.
I mean, that sounds like just an excellent program to really strengthen the bonds within a community, from education through into real life work experience and exposure. So that's a fabulous program. I agree. There was a lot of different communities throughout this country that could definitely benefit from something like that. I know we're going to be wrapping up here, Jim, as I really appreciate for your time. But I know, with all the solid information that you've provided today, if we do have listeners that would like to learn more about OFD or engage with yourself, et cetera, and is there a way for them to get in touch with your organization?
Oh, absolutely. You can go to OFD.com. Or mountainhouse.com, our brand name, and get information about the company and then all the contact information about us. And we're very proud of the fact of making our Mountain House product here and shipping it all over the world for people. So I will help anybody that I can help.
Jim, I really appreciate it. Again, appreciate your time today, and thanks for coming in and jumping on the show today.
All right. Thank you, Matt, for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.